Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, I am Piclet here once again, and I'm back for some more yet again for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker for the Nintendo Wii U, Nintendo Switch, and of course Nintendo 3DS. Now if you couldn't tell at this point already, this is actually my post-commentary for the whole entire video. It's because, well, I'll explain more details onto that, because previously, or in this case in the last episode, is the fact that we did manage to able to actually go through almost the entirety of the forms of the actual special episode book. And despite the fact we did have some bit of some trial and error moments, especially because of how the fact that with the forms of the Wingo's Double Trouble boss, which I will admit though right away, that boss is actually a lot more harder compared to the forms of how it does it whenever you previously fight Wingo to begin with. So, yeah, today for this episode is going to be a true definition of a true finale of this game's Let's Play, because we are about to be moving on to the true final level. In this case, that if you think that Mummy Me Maze Forever was the true final level in the particular game of Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, specifically on the Nintendo Switch version, because if you play this on the Wii U and the 3DS, well, the Mummy Me Maze Forever level is the true final level after all. But in this case, in this particular version, it might not be, because even then, well, we'll mention more on that as soon as we're able to go through this mission out of the way first, because obviously I totally missed out by the forms of the actual mission objective, or the purpose of this is the fact that we need to visit this level again, and obviously the entire portion of this objective right there is the fact that we need to take care of every single big boost, most likely, because even then, I think I was missing one area, well actually two areas specifically, that I've able to actually miss out for that big boost. One of them is actually near to the tree stump, and exponentially, if you step onto this particular platform here, after you take care of these little mini versions of those boosts, or the normal sized boosts, there's another big boo I was actually missing. So because of that, I will show you just in case of how to complete the mission as normal, so yeah, you probably get the idea for that. So today was actually the forms of today's day actually, which is the celebration of today is the forms of the 29th of March in the forms of in 2019, because I was originally going to be able to like upload this at some point in Wednesday, but because that Sonic needs to able to finish up with his Let's Play of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed first, or in this case for this matter, he's almost nearly towards the end of the game actually, or in this case for the actual Let's Play of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, specifically in the Grand Prix videos and stuff, because he's now moving on to the mirror versions of, you know, the Grand Prix Cups now. So even then they're expecting of such, then he could able to actually get back into that point until at the very beginning of April. So, and after all that, he might actually go back into Shadow the Hedgehog, because even then, that way we could able to finish some of these Let's Plays for the time. So, anyways though. So as far as you already know, is the fact that Yoshi's Crafted World has been recently came out today, on not only by the forms of our country, but the forms of the UK, but also the North America and Japan's release as well. And I believe also the Australian versions as well, which it can be true, because unlike South Korea, they did manage to able to release some of the games a little bit later than the forms of our countries, so generally speaking, that's as far as we can go. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention about this actually is the fact that, well, you know how I did manage to deal with the forms of those peepers from last time, but I don't think peepers will not count in this mission, because only specifically the big boos that you have to take care of. So once you deal with all that, then you will be good to go with level 15. So anyways, let's move on to the last level, and especially noticeable with the true final level in the entire game, including DLC especially too, we have this familiar level, Chaos in the Grand Labyrinth. Do you recognize this level? It's basically a spiritual successor, or in this case, a spiritual sequel to the forms of Mummy Me Maze Forever. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Although, the noticeable difference is this time around though is that, as you can see, that rather than just actually getting all the way towards the forms of, or you still need to get to the forms of the warp blocks, basically, but the major difference is this time around though is the fact that we need to able to take out those multi-type enemies until you're able to actually go ahead and receive the warp block until you move on to the next area. So that might be the only noticeable differences by the forms of this level, and especially noticeable with the Mummy Me Maze Forever, because in the forms of Mummy Me Maze Forever, that in that level, that you have to cope with the forms of like, you have to go all the way, while just simply navigating through the actual maze, while you have to find the forms of that particular warp block in order to actually just get to the next area. But even then, especially noticeable how the fact that a Mummy Me Maze Forever level that you have to stumble across for about a grand total of 50 floors, which is quite a lot and ridiculous at the same time. But it's not as noticeable in this level this time around, because you see that how the fact that because the actual main gimmick this time around is the fact that obviously we still need to be able to deal with the forms of the Mummy Me itself, but I think this is the only time we're going to be seeing the Mummy Me in the forms of the special episode levels. So that's pretty interesting, all things to be concerned. But even then though, that's as far as I can usually say about this here. So even then though, you're going to be doing that a lot. Sometimes though, whenever we get to level or floors 4, 9, and 14, and 19, and even towards the end, it just goes all over the place sometimes, because they always get a multitude of those moles to begin with. And as a matter of fact though, you really have to get to the forms of that particular warp block in order to actually just to get to this point. So, but I will admit though right away is the fact that straight off the bat, especially if you do this level normally, is actually the easiest part of the level for me, at least. Because, thankfully though, that the actual save system, or the actual save spots, are actually almost somewhat close to each other. Because if you get to like floors 5, and 10, and 15, and I believe 20, except 25, because even then, we'll mention more on that whenever we get to it, and I do apologize by the forms of my capturing footage software is actually a little bit glitched up, but even then, that's as far as I can usually state it for that point. So, then I've no idea why I keep on restarting for that point, because here's my least favorite part about the level, actually, to make this a little bit more tougher compared to the forms of the grabbing 5,000 coins on Mummy Me Maze Forever, because in Mummy Me Maze Forever, the actual get to the forms of the actual, like, getting to the very end of the level is actually the toughest part. But the forms of the mission of the forms of that level is actually rather easy, because there is actually a multitude of coins, especially by the forms of how the fact that you can get several golden mushrooms if you really want to become richer than ever. But it's completely opposite this time around, because I actually don't find this level to be that much harder, because it's actually way easier to me though than the likes of all this. But on the other hand though, the mission objective in this particular level is actually a lot more harder, or especially much more tougher, compared to the forms of how it does in Mummy Me Maze Forever level, specifically if you grab like 5,000 coins, as I said before. Because the main reason for that is because, well, I'll explain more details onto that whenever we get to that point, because even then, what I'm going to do is the fact that I'm going to do the same way for how it does in most of the missions of, you know, the special episode at this point, is the fact that I'm going to go through the level itself first, and then after that, then I would able to actually come back for that for the bonus mission objective and stuff like that. So that might be my only solution about this, actually. So even then, yeah, for the most part though, much like any forms of how it does it in, you know, Mummy Me Maze Forever levels, the fact that if you go to that, like specifically 5 or floor 5 or floor 10 or even more than that, sometimes if you go onto the forms of the safe spots, it'll lead you to the forms of, like, you know, a whole bunch of, I don't know exactly what you call them, but in the forms of like a circular formation of that little plunker that you have to pull out from. Sometimes it can either contains the golden mushroom, and especially noticeable with the super mushrooms, of course, assuming if you keep on getting hit by the forms of most of the enemies throughout this level. So basically, that's how this goes. Basically, whenever you go through certain rooms, that the beginning portion always starts off with the forms of the Piranha Plant room. And when you move on to, like, well, specifically in rooms 1 through 4, and especially noticeable by the forms of when we actually on to rooms 6 through 9, it's now moved on to Blue Shy Guys specifically, because I would assume that the Blue Shy Guys is actually a little bit more faster compared to the forms of how it does it on the red counterparts, if I remember correctly. But even then, I might as well able to actually just to find out for myself. And I believe where we actually, as you can see right now, on rooms 11 through 14, that we actually start to deal with by the forms of the Chemic room. And then right about now, until whenever we get to room 16 through 19, that we actually stumbled across these particular bird-type enemies, or in this case, the Fliptors, which I might be a little bit wrong with that pronunciation, but even then, though, that's as far as I usually try to concern of what the actual name's pronunciation-wise. So, but apart from that, though, that's, you know. So, oh Christ, oh God, oh man, that was really close. But again, we'll mention more on that whenever we get to the mission objective of that point, because even then, yeah, it looks like this is going to be very tough, because all you have to do from that, well, you know, I'll mention more on that later, because for now, now we move on to level, or in this case, room number 18. I'm quite surprised we're actually in a halfway point of this already, or in this case, for this, specifically in this level, because I say that because, well, I believe there are a grand total of 30 floors you have to go to this time around, which is, to me, is actually a little bit more balanced, compared to the forms of how it does it in level 50 floors, on the forms of how it does it in Mummy Me Maze Forever, because it reminds me of that particular Super Monkey Ball game, specifically the old school Monkey Ball game, which the forms of Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2, that normally speaking about the fact that if you could definitely tell with the forms of how the fact that the only differences between this level and especially noticeable with, you know, Mummy Me Maze Forever level, that's how the fact of the matter is, though, is the fact that I would assume that this level is actually the advanced difficulty because of how the fact that you have to go through, like, you know, 30 floors. And then, in Mummy Me Maze Forever level, it's basically the expert difficulty, because there are 50 floors, as I said before. But it leads you to the most despicably amount of enemies you have to go through, to be more honestly, because the worst offender of the forms of, you know, in the Mummy Me Maze Forever level was actually by the forms of those stupid charging chucks, because they quite literally all over the place, and at the same time, if you keep on getting yourself screwed over by these guys, then you have to go all the way back to the very beginning. And I believe that could be the same applies for this level too, even though I haven't really tested out for myself yet, just because this is actually the first time playing this, so don't expect things too much, mind you, because even then, that's for the most part though, I'm actually just breezing for this thing's no problem right there, so, but even then though, that's, now we move on to the forms of the final 10 floors, as you can tell from this point. Now, generally speaking, that the Peeper's rooms are actually in the forms of, floors 21 through 24, but when we get to floors 25, and especially noticeable with 28, that we actually get onto the forms of probably the hardest part about this level, which is of course, the bullet bill sections, which again, we'll might as well mention more on that whenever we get to the hardest. I will say this for this matter, this is by far the hardest mission in the entire game in my opinion, just because, well, again, we'll mention more on that later, because for now, in room 29, you have to dig through a lot, I mean a lot of those little mole enemies, and then once in a while, as soon as you find that warp block, then there you go, you actually reach to the very end, in this case, floor 30, so even then, the actual plunking section is actually a little bit more of a different shape because it's now a crown shape because, you know, special episode is actually based off around, you know, collecting crowns. And that crown right over there is actually kind of familiar to you. For those of you who ever missed out on our Let's Play, or in this case Blossom's Let's Play, of, you know, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, that is the forms of the Super Crown from New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. What's the actual, like, emphasis on the forms of some connections between several Mario titles from the past, like specifically they have Super Mario 3D World levels from the Wii U version of Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and they somehow connected between the story, and especially noticeable for the Nintendo Switch version and the 3DS version for the Super Mario Odyssey Kingdom levels, and then somehow they also been connected due to the story, or in this case the midpoint of the story. Well, nothing and more likely not in the beginning though, but now we have the Super Crown, which makes a little bit of acknowledgement of, you know, before when, or after when New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe came out for the Nintendo Switch for about, like, I would say 2 months ago at this point, so, it's pretty insane if you ask me. But anyways, once you finish up the credits right there, it takes you into the exact same credits as, specifically in credits 1, about the fact of the matter is, though, is that it shows the exact same locations as before, but this time around you do have the Super Crown with you, so, in fact, the Super Crown itself is actually hanging in the edge of the actual minecart, so, yeah, nothing remarkably different about it, just the exact same credit sequence as you do by the forms of how it does it in episode 1 book. So even then though, that is nothing else to be said and done. So even then though, in truth though, is the fact that the true final level in Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, specifically in the DLC department, how the fact of the matter is though, I found this way more easier compared to the forms of how it does in, you know, Mummy Me Maze Forever. But until the mission objective, however though, we'll get to that in just a moment, because even then, there's no point for able to actually talk about this at this point. I mean, there's actually a little bit more to this throughout, but I'm not gonna really just trying to end off the actual Let's Play off without even like proper, you know, best ending or something like that to conclude from that. So, anyways though, so we got ourselves the I would say the final crown in the game, and once you're done with that, it takes you back to the title screen, and that's about it. Just like in the forms of how it does it in the previous books episodes. Well, the only exceptions, of course, the bonus books. So even then, let's head back into this level. Alright, so if you couldn't tell already about the fact that this will took me for about 30 attempts to able to actually do with this mission, because in order to actually succeed by the forms of the bonus mission on this level, that obviously when we get to floor 10 and 15, and especially 20 mind you, that you've actually stumbled across in one of those Toad Brigades. And what you do? Well, we need to finish the main level while you simply carrying along, or in this case tag along, with any 4 of those brigades. So because of that, as a result, this is easily the hardest mission in the whole entire freaking game. Almost to the point about the fact that it took me about 3 hours to able to actually get this, you know, mission a little bit of a reception. Because although, the best advice for you, especially noticeable because this is on the Nintendo Switch version, the pointer in this version is a godsend. Especially because, how the fact that, as far as I mentioned this before in the past, since about almost a year ago at this point, you can essentially stun enemies or freeze them for a few seconds, but if you manage to let go of them, that might be alright, but if only if the fact that if you don't accidentally run into them. So even then though, well, at least for the most part, the floors 1 through 10 wasn't all that bad, but when we get to move on to the forms of floor 11 and onwards, holy crap, the enemies themselves will outright against with you, because even then, that as you can see, we've actually stumbled across one of those Toad Brigades. But even then, you might be guys are probably thinking that this might be very similar to the forms of one of those similar mission types as the forms of how it does it in the bonus books. But to make things a lot more tougher this time around, although to give credits due, is the fact that you don't die instantly if you're one of your members who actually died instantly. Although, the Captain Toad himself gets like 2 hits, which is obviously the actual main point. But the Toad Brigade, however though, only has 1 hit point. So even then though, again, if you let the enemies, especially the Mummy Me, were able to touch one of the Toad Brigades, well, your mission will be entirely be gone, and you'll have to say like goodbye to that mission. So, yeah, this is going to be a lot of tests of your patience, and even then, that is, you know, a little bit more of a baffling to me though, because even then, that I swear, I did manage to able to done this like several times already, but rarely do I ever times do I always keep on running to enemies sometimes, and oftentimes while I was turning around, then the other Toad Brigades decide to able to go ahead and wander off like nothing else, and die instantly in the process, and it's just a nightmare, because even then, I swear I did want to able to actually 100% for basically pretty much everything, but the fact of the matter is though is that in this one mission, just one mission alone to be the worst of the bunch, even, I will say this by now, this is easily the worst mission objective I've ever come across into this game so far, just because, well, it definitely has a lot of frustrating moments, especially when we get to the end. Well, to be more specifically, well, at least for floors 21 through 24 might be okay, but the worst offender of the forms of this particular point, however, though, is this actual mole enemy, because what that will usually try to do to you is the fact that they really love to fake you out whenever you're trying to able to decide to catch them up, and especially noticeable with the forms of floor 23, because if you couldn't tell at this point already, I'm going to be spending most of my time just wandering around almost like a roundabout circle, because even then, you don't have your free open room until you're able to actually bypass those peepers most of the time. And sometimes though, the actual directions what the moles decide to able to plow through the actual ground is entirely luck based at times, because there are plenty of times they always trying to able to like go to the direction I was hoping to able to actually get to, but then next you notice by a few seconds ago, or about a few seconds later, they decide to ignore me, because even then, they always really want to encourage you to able to get him in the most very dangerous hazards, because even then, that might be the only nitpicking of my only gripe I have with this particular mission, and because of that, the worst defender of the bunch, or in this case to me anyway, with the Monty Mole or the actual mole enemy decides to run away from, and that is freaking floor 25 through 28. For the love of God, it took me a few tries to able to actually bypass for this stupid section, because, well, obviously the bullet bill section is actually the hardest part about this this particular level. Well, at least for the mission objective. Let's run down this list, shall we? 1, because the bullet bills might actually shoot like to shoot in one direction, and even then there's no way you can able to kill them, or in this case you can't stun them for, well, you can stun them as much as you want, but that doesn't mean anything in how the fact that if you let go of the form to the pointer button, specifically if you press the trigger buttons, then obviously you guarantee you get screwed over by that particular point. 2, as I mentioned before, how the fact that there's quite a few moles that love to able to fake you out whenever the moles is trying to go at, leaving if you pretty much be damned, or even in this case by the forms of that, you'll pretty much get doubly got screwed over if you're able to make a wrong turn. 3, bullet bills might occasionally able to actually just break their blocks exponentially, which even then, if they start to break even more blocks, this makes it entirely impossible to able to actually avoid them most of the time, because even then, that's as far as I can able to actually think about to this point. And may I remind you, because you don't have enough room to able to actually escape in during time. 4, because of the mummy me will actually chase you all around, sometimes about the fact that sometimes you easily get cornered by the forms of not only the bullet bills, but also the mummy me itself as well. But even then though, and 5, and my personal gripe, is the fact that again, Monty Mole's, the mole enemy's movements is incredibly freaking random and luck based. So, and after all this stuff, after a whole bunch of attempts or anything like that, then thank God, level 29, or floor 29 specifically, there aren't any enemies to begin with, although, thankfully, there aren't any bullet bills around here. So with that being said, once you deal with all this rest of the frustration here and there, oh jeez, it's a bit like how it does it in Mummy Me Maze Forever, doesn't it? But the only main factor about this is that I found the actual main level itself is not that hard actually, to me though anyway, but the entire mission itself is actually the hardest part about this, because even then, I felt completely opposite now, with of course by the forms of, the Mummy Me Maze Forever, and you get the gist of how difficult this level can be. But apart from that though, we are done with the special episode of Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. And we got ourselves a Super Crown nonetheless, so I think it still looks new, even that you don't necessarily collected the already collected Super Crown, because it usually just makes it more like a continuity to the forms of the new Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, basically. But apart from that though, yeah, as far as I can tell from that. So, yeah, let's get to my final thoughts of Captain Toad Treasure Tracker as far as the DLC content is concerned, because I already mentioned about the forms of my overall final thoughts of specifically the Switch version of Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, easily without doubt, to me anyway, the definitive way playing this game, and music still looks great even to this day, and the visuals still look absolutely outstanding, especially if this is on the Nintendo Switch, because this certainly runs a hell of a lot more better than the forms of the 3DS version in my opinion, just because the 3DS version does downgrade the forms of that frames per second right there. But apart from those side of things, that's, well, not much else to tell. As far as DLC is concerned, it's pretty alright. I mean, not the best pieces of DLCs I've ever seemed to play through, because even then, they all just share the exact same levels as of how it does in the previous levels that we've already been into from the past. It's kind of like how it did in the forms of, in the Sonic Unleashed DLC packs for, in the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 versions, they normally go for the exact same levels, but a little bit more different difficulty curve, and especially noticeable too many obstacles in your way. So it's kind of like the same thing for this game. But apart from that though, they do have quite a few new levels to the mix, but surely a hell of a lot more fun to be able to go through. But the mission objectives themselves, well, personally will have to be my least favorite part about the actual DLC, because even then, sometimes though, it's extremely frustrating and is a little bit more difficult to compromise at times, because even then, sometimes though, I seem to be able to get screwed over by most of the parts throughout. So, but with that being said folks, that was it for the forms of the actual proper Let's Play of Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and I hope you guys are able to actually enjoy this Let's Play basically for the real time for this point this time around. But apart from that though, I really enjoy this game nonetheless. I'm more likely concerned about the fact that with the one last thing before I end off this Let's Play off, that yes, this special episode book still retains the time attack mode, which I probably honestly won't cover for this, because I think that's the reason why the final level does not contain the forms of the time attack mode to begin with, and especially noticeable with that hide-and-seek Toad game too, so... But even then, no, that's as far as I can say. So this is me, Piglet, from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos, and I'll see you guys next time, because even then, I'm now going to be moving on to... back to Super Mario Galaxy Let's Play to do the Super Luigi Galaxy playthrough, which will do happen during the likes of it next month. So even then though, I'm really excited for that, and hopefully I can able to replay that Mario Galaxy game again, but this time with Luigi. So thanks for watching, and take care of yourselves.